very happy July 18th in this year 2021. The weather is beautiful, and we just wrapped up Dennis Reynolds, Reverend Dennis Reynolds, Talk a Fugitive Faith. So always a pleasure, Dennis. Just a little bit of housekeeping. This is the second to the last of the remote services that we will be doing in this way. We will continue to post services on YouTube, but because we are meeting in person starting August 1st, the schedule will be rearranged. So watch the MQuest for that. With that in mind, who would like to go first? Yep, I'm thinking JC. Yep.
I love having a word, fugitivity, now because it's me. It's my experience. During my ages between 12 and graduating from college, I realized that I released myself from the Episcopalian Christian pledge, creed, one thing at a time, until when I left college, I was ready to be a Unitarian. And I love that we maintain the fugitivity as our modus operandi, because things are changing. And the way we thought they were, even though like it seemed right at the time, can seem wrong now. And we need to learn that that doesn't mean one thing wrong means it's all wrong. One thing wrong means I'm learning something. So I love the idea of fugitivity being a functional process of Unitarianism, Universalism. Thank you for that.
And I did want to tie in that history piece that we've sort of always been that way. That was the beginnings of what was labeled Unitarianism, is a rejection of what was the proper and prescribed of the Catholic Church. And the important thing to remember about those times was that post the Council of Nicaea, the Catholic Church was the legal church of the Roman Empire. And so the teachings of the church had the power of law. And that's partially, you know, why a few centuries later, well, maybe 10 centuries later, in the beginnings of the Renaissance, that the Inquisition had the authority that it had, is that they could enforce the law. That creed of churches also became the law of the land. That's why Servetus had to run away from the Inquisition, and you know, the Spanish and Italian legal authorities cooperated with the Inquisition.
You know, Dennis, you mentioned Michael Servetus, and that's always been kind of a sticking point for me, because and let me give you this and see what you think of this, is that Michael Servetus, as in history's one of the most prominent Unitarians, right? Yeah. Meaning that you reject the Trinity. The modern Unitarian Church does not prescribe a theological belief system, right? So there's nothing stopping somebody from joining the Unitarian Universalist Church and believing in the Trinity. And right. Yeah, and so because of that, I think, well, gosh, did Servetus die for nothing then? You know, because if Unitarian Universalism is a home for Trinitarians now as well, and I think more than anything, what Michael Servetus's life is emblematic to for me is that if he died for anything, he died for religious freedom.
Yes, agreed.
Absolutely. And the notion that in our faith there is no such concept as heresy, that there is not a creed that is the truth. I mean, one of the profound changes in Western religion was the Council of Nicaea, which established creed, the Nicene Creed, that in order to be a Christian, Unitarian or Trinitarian, it said you have to believe this. And not only did that council was called by the emperor. It wasn't the religious people got together and said, we want to get, one clear story. It was the emperor Constantine saying, you need to get one story. And then it became the Roman Catholic Church was the church of the empire. So I think that's an important part of the history as well. So he was defying, what by his time was the Holy Roman Empire. But he was not only defying the church, but he was defying the state that endorsed those creeds. But you're right, Michael, it's the beginning of a non-creedal faith. And, and I invite people to take a look at, links from the UUA website to the Christian Fellowship, the UU Christian Fellowship. And many of my friends and colleagues who identify as Christian Unitarian Universalists or Unitarian Universalist Christians, however they, put their priorities of their own identities, would describe themselves as somewhat Trinitarian. And there's, so there's various pieces in there.
Yeah, just wanted to pull that up since you talked about it. So that's cool. I didn't know that existed. So there we go.
There you go. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, thank you, Dan. It's good.
May I add, this came up in conversation yesterday on the deck when our beloved new family member, almost, well, not official family member, but Daniel said, well, just where's the roots in this faith? I think the beauty of it was the all inclusivity, the fact that, and I shared with him the sources, and Diane commented about the graphics that we had at the beginning of the recorded service, which showed the actual where we all came from, which was really a really good graphic. But I think that it's a mystery to a lot of people, as maybe it's like a free for all kind of thing, that, just anything goes. But and also the fact that each individual church has its own personality because it's democratically run. And the fact that we don't have a creed and we don't have a box where you've got to believe this or else, or you can't be there, or you can't join, or whatever you want to call it, that it includes all these thoughts, and that the individual search for truth and meaning is so crucial to what we are about. And so to talk to somebody new who is not familiar, either by just not being aware or not having the opportunity, So I was very delighted. And then Joe also joined in the conversation when he came back. And, I think Daniel did get some type of an idea what we were about.
You got an education.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, and that's one thing. And Martha, you and I have talked about it a little bit about, on the Sundays I'm with you, I'm bringing Unitarian Universalism through our history, lifting up principles.
Yeah,
there's of the sense that, I talked about, that transcendentalist major branch, the humanists who are non-theists and liberal Christianity. The Universalist Church, another image is the Universalist Church. Their symbol before the merger in 1961 was the two circles.
Right.
We often use with a cross in the lower left side of that circle. So it was Christianity surrounded by universal faith. And it was a more, at its core, Christian faith prior to merger, for the most part, than we are now. And then in the late 60s was probably the strongest humanist time. And we, emerged by the time we got to the beginning of this century with what I called a thread of humanist fundamentalism that people who would push back against. They would describe the G word. And in some UU congregations, you could refer to the G word, but don't say God or goddess.
Mm.
We're humanists here. Well, some are, some aren't. There's also a UU Buddhist fellowship, so as well as, the UU humanists and many subcategories within that. But then there are many of us who are smorgasbord Unitarian Universal, which is sometimes how I describe myself. But, I mean, in terms of Christian roots, I was raised in a Christian church, and I describe fundamentalist Christian church. Many of their teachings I've rejected, but I describe myself as I'm not a Christian, but I'm not a non-Christian.
Right.
Mhm. Yes.
Shaped and nurtured in the best part of that faith, in the teachings attributed to the Rabbi Jesus. Do I, ascribe to creedal Christianity? No. Do I believe in everything attributed to the Apostle Paul? No. Do I like most of what I read in the Gospels? Yes, including the so-called heretical Gnostic Gospels that are also attributed to the Rabbi
Yes.
Jesus. The Gospel of Thomas is
Yeah.
been compared to very much to Buddhist teachings. And so, I think it's an important part to help people understand too. We have some history. We're not just a bunch of new age woo-woo folks that came together and called ourselves a church.
No offense to the new age people out there.
Right. We're not just that.
We're a bunch of old
parents.
age fools.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's cool. I hope nobody minds my rampant screen sharing.
Oh,
Uh,
that's great. That just adds to dimension to the whole get together. Thank you.
So we've been joined by Connie, and so anybody who wants to dive in, I don't have a list going. So
I want to hear what Laline had to say.
Yeah, I will call on you. I swear I will call on you. Yeah, go ahead, Lily.
I didn't know I was volunteering.
You are.
But I would love to say, Dennis, that when you do history like that, it's very affirming in terms of where I find myself today and the path that I took, because I've never had a religion other than my Unitarian religion, though I was born into the Jewish faith for about the first 11 years. But when I listen to you, I realize, there are smatterings of so many things that have been influenced upon me, but most of them, as I learn UU history, which I have done a lot from your teachings, I realize are the exact experiences that I had outside of religion, that when I walked into a Unitarian church and I listened, I realized, oh, this is where I want to be. This is why I haven't been, anywhere else. So anytime you want to throw history in, just know that there are a lot of us who don't have that, and like me, really kind of hang on what you have to contribute.
Yeah, kids raised in the faith often do. And then I didn't have a whole lot of it till I went to a UU seminary, and I had to take UU history. I was required. And it was taught by my favorite professor at seminary, David Bumbaugh, and he was awesome. And in terms of how he brought it, heightened my interest in, understanding that part of our rootedness, that we are rooted. And I think having those historic roots helps keep us solidly. When the winds of change may blow, we still have those roots that ground us. To extend that metaphor of rootedness, that's that which reaches into the ground and holds us fast. And then now we've become, somewhat eclectic in the sense that I remember a friend who said, I never could fit in a church until I felt like I was a square peg trying to fit into round holes. And until I found the Unitarian Universalist Church, and somebody said, "So did you find a bunch of, square holes to fit into?" And she said, "No, I found a community of a whole bunch of other square pegs." So we're seeking a place to fit, and recognizing that fit is that the seeking process is often the point. It's not trying to come to an endpoint, to you put a theological language, revelation is continuing. Revelation is never sealed. Revelation is an ongoing process for each of us, and we can do it more effectively when we do it collectively. And we may end up, these discussions have shown that people will listen to actually the same words from the so-called authority figure, right? Whatever that means in Unitarian Universalism. And everybody hears a different sermon. It's a different message for each and every set of ears, every heart and head. We try to do that, use both our heads and our hearts and our soul to come to that sense of our own, truth and meaning.
That's part of
That was a
being
little
a
preachy.
part of a
Hey,
congregation of free thinkers. Though, if we didn't see ourselves as free thinkers, we wouldn't allow that kind of listening. We'd all be listening for the word.
right.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, I
And
like that.
universalism invites us to be open-hearted free thinkers.
Yeah.
And Unitarianism can get a little heady. And my wife Suzanne was raised in a Unitarian church, and it was too heady for her. And when it became more universalist, it really became a home again for her. There's some of that stuff you have to push away and rebel from what may feel like it was imposed to find out what's genuinely yours.
Great. Well, okay, Connie, and then how about then Kim after Connie?
As usual, I can't think of a name. So it's the professor who was dismissed from her position and then took a position at Howard University.
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That lady, I can't think of her name.
I think her name either.
Okay, but I don't know if any of you heard the interview of that woman, but I think it's right into what Dennis was talking about in terms of inclusive justice and fugitivity. And when she spoke, she explained why she went to Howard University. Did any of you, the rest of you, hear that?
No, was it on NPR, Connie? Where did you hear it?
Probably, since
Yeah.
that's all yeah, probably.
Yeah.
But
I
anyhow,
heard something about it, but I didn't hear the whole interview, no.
it was the part that touched me so deeply is how long she had fought for equality and wanted to be recognized by the white community and blah, blah, blah. And said, I've decided to go home, so to speak. She went to Howard University where she was going to be around people who accepted her for who she was. And she was surrounded by people that thought not the same way that she did, but it was just a wonderful interview. And it made me think of fugitivity, that word in Dennis's sermon is she removed herself from a battle that she'd been in for 20 years and went to a place where she felt accepted.
Right. And I want to make sure that we remember credit for that word goes to Reverend Tate, who I got it from at that GA sermon. You know, and it has a particular application within the African American experience. And I think that's what you're describing in the power of the historical Black colleges. And I've read other things from, you know, Black people who chose to go there, where they could fully embrace and be who they are in an affinity group kind of setting while they're gaining their education. So I think that's just one more example of the finding the affinity group, you know, but not staying there,
Yeah.
you know, and, you know.
So just for clarification, I believe we're talking about Nicole Hannah-Jones,
Yeah.
who is
Yes.
yes, who is one of the originators of the 1619 project,
Yes.
which was a you know, I think I can use the word radical in a good context here, a radical view of American history, which is worth looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If you're allowed, and we're still allowed in this state to look at it and actually discuss it in the schools.
Yeah.
You know, for anybody who says that any topic was off limit in school, they never took my history class when I taught high school. So, so Kim was next.
Well, first off, I had a chuckle over The Fugitive because as an Adventist, sometimes we feel like we're that way because of the day we worship. We go to Sabbath. We're considered to be kind of weird and way out there for worshiping on the Sabbath as opposed to on Sunday. So I was kind of chuckling a little bit on that. But let's see here. I just was, because I believe in the Trinity as an Adventist. And so you were saying about you believing in one, I don't remember how to pronounce the word, but believing in one God as being one as opposed to being three people as one. So I'm like, oh, so where's the Bible verses at? So I looked them up, and it was kind of funny that I was looking up for universal ones. It was Matthew 28, 18. And then I was looking up for mine, the Trinity, and it was Matthew 28, 19. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. So it didn't really, I didn't really come to any conclusions other than I still believe in Trinity.
Right.
But my question is, so I'm a little confused, and you might have kind of answered it a little bit, but I'm like, so is your religion, are you a religion? You know, I don't want to, I'm not trying to be sarcastic or anything. I'm just confused, you know, how are you a religion, you know? So, and you're kind of saying some stuff about it, but do you guys believe in a God? I think I've asked that before and I got like 20 answers, different answers and giggles. So that's what I was just wondering is, you know, do you consider yourself a religion and believing in a God or not? Or I wasn't quite sure, because, you know, if you're reading in the Bible saying, well, I don't believe in the Trinity, then that strikes me as you're being a little religious and, you know, believing in God.
Right. And Kim, let me answer part of that, because you've got, you know, a number of questions embedded in that, and that's a good and that's a good thing. In the first piece, I would go to the Dr. Michael Hogue, who was my primary theology professor in seminary. And Michael said he wasn't sure we are a religion, but more a community of the multi-religious. Okay. And by that, there's two pieces that I think are true. Community. We are a covenanted faith, which means we pledge to be in covenant, in deep grounded relationship with each other, as we recognize that we may have different beliefs. And so, as I was saying, there's a UU Buddhist fellowship. Some of us identify as Buddhists. And Buddhism does not recognize a divinity necessarily. Some Buddhist practitioners do. There are Christians among us. There are pagans amongst us. a covenant of Unitarian Universalist practicing paganism, who look to mostly neo-pagan, European neo-pagan traditions, who worship in those traditions. And there are folks who come from Jewish backgrounds who will refer to themselves as Jewus. UU. And I've been to UU Seders. That is, you know, a Seder ritual framed in a Unitarian Universalist
Me too.
context. So
Yep.
by some people's definition, we're not a religion. If a religion is a community where all believe the same, we wouldn't fit that kind of a definition. Sometimes my favorite description is I think we're a faith movement. You know, I like that one. But like I said, Michael Hogue was my senior professor who, you know, did his PhD at the University of Chicago, which is a pretty renowned theological school. Brilliant, brilliant man that I learned a lot from. But so, you know, we're both and, you know, it's not an either or, you know, but we are intentionally non-creedal. And we are intentionally covenantal. And then there's a whole other thing, and maybe there's a sermon there about exploring covenant, because covenant's not an easy word to work with either, other than it's more than an agreement. It's an agreement and a promise that becomes timeless. If you use the language of soul, then you commit your soul to the agreement. If you use the language of divinity, then a covenant historically in religious tradition has been an agreement between me and you and God. It's triangular, has a different kinds of Trinitarian triangular notion, but it would be, you know, a covenant between Michael and I, and that frame would be between Michael and I and God. Like, I swear to God, Michael, I'm going to honor this agreement.
Right.
And I mean it with that kind of depth. Okay. And even if that language doesn't fit your definition of what's ultimate for you, if the word is problematic, then it's still between us and that which we find ultimate. Another language one, and I'll bring it up because I brought up the University of Chicago. One of the professors there, and I'm blanking on his name and it'll come to me in a minute, who taught at University of Chicago. I'm not going to struggle for his name, but one of his phrases was he defined God as the ground of being. And
Yes.
in the basement of the Divinity School is a coffee shop titled The Grounds of Being. And they have a great t-shirt that's Grounds of
Let's get that
Being.
down.
And it says on the back of the t-shirt in Gothic script, where God drinks coffee. Niebuhr, it may have been Reingold Niebuhr, I think.
Oh, okay. That's a good name.
Yeah, that's true. Could I take a stab at the question? I think of, okay, so like we could have our belief systems either in the supernatural or in a belief in correct behavior, right? And all of these beliefs that an individual adheres, oh my gosh, we lost Kim. But well, maybe she'll watch it later. All of these beliefs that we adhere to could be thought of as like books, right? Maybe like our own personal liturgy. If that's the case, then Unitarian Universalism can be seen through the 7 principles and the sources as the shelf on which we put our books.
Oh, okay.
Yes, there you go. That's a great, I like that.
And there was a minister, and again, it's one of those names that'll come to me in a little bit because he's one of the most quoted in the readings in the back of the hymnal in the 1960s or 50s, before the merger. He was a Universalist originally, and Charles Street Meeting House was his church. And like I said, his name will come to me in a little bit, probably right after our conversation. Right. But if you Google Charles Street Meeting House, you'll find him. And what he did is he went into this traditional old church and he tore out all the pews and moved the pulpit, or the lectern, whatever word you prefer, down into the middle of the room, and got a bunch of folding chairs. And up on the altar, he put a bookshelf,
Ah,
which were
Okay,
all the sacred texts he could come up with. Okay,
Oh.
so are they going to say,
well, thank you.
famous
Thanks, Pete.
pastor?
Oh,
Um,
uh,
It'll be in recent history, but I'm going to keep talking, let
Okay,
somebody
yeah,
else look for that. At any rate, I mean, I even remember to worship is to something, something. That's the reading from the hymnal. And then behind the altar, he commissioned a painting of the Andromeda Galaxy.
Oh, my.
And, and that was sacred space, was to recognize that here we are under the stars as a part of all of this. And this is humanity's effort to understand all of that as described in all of these books. So,
Wow,
and
cool.
so, that's part of the history of the change in the movement. Was that. I mean, in the old Unitarian churches that you still go into in New England, there's a stairway up to the elevated pulpit where the preacher stands up there and delivers the truth. In the First Church Chicago, that's still there, but nobody goes up there. They're down, closer on the ground and say, well, here's my view on it.
that's cool. Yeah, it's nice to have like all of these things to look at after our discussion. Martha, I'm sorry, I think I cut you off.
No, I just was going to say, this just goes to prove our constant search for our personal search for truth and meaning. I mean, that just reaffirms everything that we talk about almost every week, because for every ears, like Dennis said, are hearing things in the, and there's no right or wrong. That, I think that's the ultimate, because you have the power in you to decide what is right for you without the fear of being struck dead by some mythical, I mean, it's just, it takes the fear out of living, as in you agree to these principles and you are the best person you can be, and you treat everyone with respect, and I could go through them all, but so that is not a creed where you have to do this, this, and this, and if you don't believe it, then you can't be there, or you can't be whatever. So
Right.
that's what I mean. That's
Right.
the difference.
Yeah.
That's a very, very, I guess, very crass description, but that's basically.
And there are things we might do when we miss the mark, which, as I shared, in a previous sermon, is one definition of sin, that give harm to others and thus damage the covenant.
Mhm.
If I do something, again, I'm not picking on you, Michael, but I used to use the description of who I might be in covenant with, is that if I do something that's harmful to you, I want to try to correct that to maintain the covenant with you. And it means I miss the mark. It means, so again, I sinned if the word doesn't give you trouble. I mean, that's part of the problem around language of faith, is there are folks who were wounded by traditions that use that language, that said their very existence was a sin.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And so that word sin gets pretty loaded if that's your history. I came out of, a fundamentalist church that I didn't want to talk about Christianity for a long time. I was a Nazarene, but my professor in seminary with whom I studied both the Hebrew Bible, what Christians call the Old Testament, and the Christian New Testament and the Gnostic Gospels, was also a former Nazarene. And we both didn't believe in that way, but we both studied those books as a source of great wisdom. But I also study, Dharma talks from Buddhist teachers as sources of great wisdom. And the guy whose name is not coming back to me yet, who did Charles Street Meeting House,
I love
was beginning a deeper study into ancient Chinese theological notions of the Taoists. And so, you know, and like I said, some Unitarian Universalists find that in pagan practices, and many of us find that in the natural world as religious naturalists. So.
So JC and Lean have to run real soon, but JC's been chomping at the bit, so go for it.
Well, the image of the minister going up the stairs and giving truth from above. My Unitarian response to that is, you listen, and you said, or even if he's up there, you still get to say or and. Your truth is great, but it may not be all of it. And I think that's how we live with things. We'll see y'all later.
Take care, ladies. Thanks for stopping by.
Bye.
I'll call you later. Okay. You
So-
guys-
I am very much looking forward to August when I actually get to see some of you folks in person.
Yes, that'll be wonderful.
Edith had her hands up.
Well, I'm fairly new to this, and my impression so far is that the Unitarians, that we can take the best parts, and actually that's true for the humanists too, the best parts of what each religion has to offer, and not reject any of them, just take what works for us. But basically, and I've said this before, I believe basically that each religion wants you to be a good, just person. I mean, that to me is like the basis of most of the religions that we have been discussing. And that's the way I look at it. And I'm still in the process of, you know, checking it all out. But am I correct in that's what it is all about?
No, I think that that's a very good summary. And one piece that I remember as a summary that came from somebody at a new member class at the church where I did my internship is what we all believe is we believe that there's something greater than ourselves. And that something greater than ourselves might be all of humanity. It might be all of the natural world out there. It might be something that we call God or goddess that's a higher power, but we believe there's something greater than just me. And sometimes we don't feel like we have to know that, but we want to come closer to understanding. And why we continue to study and explore and have these conversations.
I would be curious, and Diane, not to put you on the spot, but as somebody who, you know, I think it's fair to say grew up in the church in a big way, right? To hear your perspective on what that means to you.
I have a lot of different opinions because I grew up, I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. And it was very much an environment that you couldn't, I didn't feel, it was very much you had to do what you were told. You had to listen, you had to follow these rules. And as a kid, I always felt like I wanted to question everything. I had a bunch of questions. I just wanted to be heard, and it was always shut down, but I really appreciated the community. And I also wanted an environment where I did believe in finding a better version of myself. I didn't necessarily believe in a higher being. I felt there was more of a higher positive energy and that we should all strive to be better people. But I still needed that environment that at least gave me some answers, or at least they were willing to challenge some of these questions. And I think that was something that I really embraced and appreciated growing up in a Unitarian Universalist environment. I've had my community. I had a safe space where I could ask questions. And also I had an environment where I could grow. I still don't know exactly what I believe in. I don't think there's one specific thing I'm leaning towards, but in a way that's really exciting because I might find something, or I might find a little bit of everything that just makes me happy. And, you know, like we were all talking about, it's our personal search for truth and justice. And that just gives me more peace than being in a religious environment that was confusing and would shut you down.
Nice.
May I just interject if I could? One of the things that Diane benefited from is she went through the religious group that is given in the UU curricula. And it's a coming of age where you spend 2 years. I was her mentor then. That's when Diane and I got together. And I had not been familiar with it, not growing up. I mean, I came to UUism as an adult. So not growing up in that, I never really understood. I didn't know about the curricula and just what those kids experienced. And Diane, maybe you could spend just a couple of minutes sharing what you folks did in that class, because a lot of people just aren't aware of it.
Yeah, I feel like
Could you
my
do that?
perspective is very interesting because I immediately went from, I had the opportunity to go, I can stay a Jehovah's Witness or practice. It took me about 6 months of up and down guilt to finally say, no, I don't want to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore. I was 13 at the time. So all of a sudden, my family member that I lived with at the time introduced us to a Unitarian church. I was not ready at all to be involved in any kind of church. I had no idea what Unitarian even meant. But I feel like of my family, I dove in. I just cannonballed right in and I embraced everything. So the coming of age program consisted of weekly meeting with my small group, anywhere between, I think, middle school to freshman year high school. And we got a history lesson of all the different religions, from where they started to how we incorporate them in Unitarian churches. We had opportunities to do community services to get us out into the environment, to our community, and help others. And we also had the opportunity to, at least at that time, come up with our own credo of what we believe in, what our understanding of spirituality meant to us, or, just religion in general. And I was definitely still lost with that area because I just freshly jumped out of a negative, I would like to consider it a negative relationship with religion, to I can see myself embracing this religion and being very happy with it, but I still didn't fully trust yet. So I was learning to trust. And I was just happy to be in an environment of a beautiful, wonderful community, and having Martha there to help guide me in the community and just get me away from all the toxicity of my life that may have just been even more than just my religious past. I'm pretty sure everybody else in my group had different experiences with this program, but it was wonderful. And I think for me, it really helped me get a very, very valuable understanding that religion isn't just extreme. You can be fluid.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, your experience of that. And I would just add, there are some pretty powerful curricula for those who enter later in life. One, Articulating Your UU Voice by Barbara um, come on. I just emailed Barbara today, Jocko Tenhoff and his partner, Barbara Wells Tenhoff.
Yes.
They're good collegial friends. And in fact, I'm emailing her because I'm the worship coordinator for the UU camp I'm going to in August for 4 days. You know, and then there's the building your own theology curricula. Ken Patton is the name I couldn't remember. And there's a bunch of readings in the back of the hymnal that are from Ken Patton.
Cool.
Right.
He was Charles Street Meeting House guy, and I felt bad about not remembering him because my mentor minister, the Reverend Carolyn Colbert, who served in Eugene for 9 years, went to Ken's church when she was a teenager. And so that was like her, you know, minister, but her father worked for the Universalist Church and a bunch of other stuff. And she married a Universalist minister and eventually went to seminary and became one. But her mom and dad were both ordained Universalists, but she went to Ken Patton's church. That place.
Ken Patton. Okay.
Yeah. Connie's next. Real quick though, when you were talking, it reminded me of a Wayne Dyer quote where he said, have a mind that is open to everything but attached to nothing. Right? You can explore. Yeah. Go ahead, Connie, sorry.
Okay, I have 2 questions for Dennis. One, those 2 curricula that you were just discussing, are those for young adults or are those for anybody?
They're an adult curricula, and I've facilitated with, you know, very mixed groups in terms of adults by age. And the last time I did that was on Whidbey Island, and one of the amazing results that came out of it, one couple that were part of it, he was historically raised in a very devout Jewish family. And he was the one who helped coordinate the Seder that we did with the UU flavor that still embraces his Judaism as an important part of his faith. And then one participant of it ended up leaving the Unitarian Universalist Church, attended the nearby Lutheran church, and is now a Lutheran seminary student. And what opened his mind, and this was kind of an interesting one, but opened his mind as an out gay man to re-embrace Christianity in a less judgmental Christian church was the building your own theology exercises and work. And the theology he built for himself was strongly Christian. And Trinitarian Christian to a point where he felt more comfortable going to worship at the Lutheran Church, which is also welcoming to LGBTQ communities and is seeking ordination in that tradition.
Wow.
So
My question is because I'm wondering, like articulating your UU voice, is that something that could be done in a certain number of sessions? I'm thinking of our adult AEO. That's what I'm thinking of. Does it have to be year long, or how does that work?
You can Google the curricula and articulating. I haven't facilitated that, but I know Barbara and Chaco wrote that when they were on sabbatical. It's available. Just, you know, go to UUA and there's adult religious curricula there. The Building Your Own Theology has a part 1, a part 2, and a part 3, each one of which has 10 weeks. And it has a handbook and kind of walks you through some exercises. So you can do it if any one of you wants to volunteer to help facilitate it. You know, it doesn't, I mean, the first time I did one, when I was a seminary student, you know, as a facilitator. And so the facilitator just facilitates. So curricula has, you know, handbooks to help guide you through it. So there are a couple of them, and there's more there too.
Reverend Annie Holmes, when she was with us several years ago, did a Building Your Own Theology.
Yeah, we
workshop.
did. I remember that.
Yeah, which
But
was,
I don't remember that following a curriculum.
oh,
I-
okay.
You might, but I didn't know.
It
I mean,
was,
I remember doing it, but I don't remember that. I don't know if she was using a certain curriculum to do that or not. I don't know.
She might have been adapting. A lot of her stuff came
Yeah.
from her background in seminary.
Here's the booklet. I just
Okay, oh, there it
put
is.
on the shelf, right?
Uh-huh.
cool.
Richard Gilbert is the author of the curriculum.
Okay.
So that might be something to consider.
Well, and I'm really interested too in the curricula with articulating. I mean, I think with our group, that'd be a great, I do. I think that would be great. I don't know how much time, you would have to devote to that, but I think that would be a great thing for our group to do. And that kind of leads up to what I want to ask Dennis, where you were talking about community who covenants, about a possible sermon in the future.
Mhm.
Okay, here's what
certainly
I'd like to ask you about that is, if I was to choose any subject area that would be so good and maybe healing for our community, it would be that sermon or that talk. I think we really, it would really be good for us.
Well, and I think, already the stuff I'm pondering for next month is around the sense of how do we come together?
Yeah.
How do we come together as a unique faith community? Because, August is the first month of actually coming together physically in the same
Yeah.
space. Some of us. There may be still many who find it far more accessible to look at the recorded version, and that, or the live stream or how it's really working. But it's an attempt to deepen the coming together as a community by doing it in multiple ways. And, and all of the stresses and gifts that have come out of doing it this way, rather than being in the same room. I mean, for one, we all burnt fewer fossil fuels.
True.
Most of us, our electricity is hydro. But to be in the room together in this virtual room, than we would. But, there's something different about coming together in Sangha, which is what the Buddhists call it, and breathing in and breathing out the same air. Well, in a time of COVID fear, we didn't want to breathe the same air as other people who might be vectors of an infection. And maybe this is a word that's just coming to me. How might we be vectors of love?
Oh, there you go.
Oh, those are all good thoughts.
Yeah. Write those down, Dennis.
Yeah.
See, this is why I'm failing at retirement, right?
Yeah.
Well,
too much to say.
Too much to ponder, and I get to ponder out loud when I talk with you folks.
some of our best thinking is often done in the course of talking about something. And that brings up structure that you didn't really think before. So, yeah.
Well, man, that was a fast hour.
Yeah.
Everyone.
I personally am very grateful for the group, and I'm so grateful that Diane is here and to be able to participate, and grateful for Dennis. I'm just, and Michael, the way he leads it, I knew that it would be quite interesting, and I'm very happy. I'm sorry that Lillian and JC had to leave, and I know that because we had a board meeting, there are other people that didn't attend today. So, but let's rock on. Let's continue.
Well, Dennis, thank you so much. That was a very thoughtful discussion, thoughtful sermon, very fruitful. Any chance for a parting thought?
Just the piece that I think it's important to ask those questions, and here, again, using the word articulation, best articulated by Kim, of saying, who are you? Who do you feel called to be?
Well, that's,
And,
yeah.
and those are important questions for us to collectively wrestle with. Why do we come together in this fugitive faith? And when you listen to the GA sermon, she ends with some comments. I urge you to think about it. She doesn't come to a final kind of, conclusion by any means, but that's for each of us to do.
Very, very well put. Well, for everyone, we will be together again at 11:30 next week for our final Sunday, doing things this way. So have a beautiful week, and we will see you later. So
Thank you,
you.
everyone. Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
bye-bye.